It's wonderful to see you all on day 2. So who had fun last night? Who stayed out too late last night? Not as many. Woo! Not going to admit it. Well, if you notice your neighbor having a little snore fest, make sure you pinch them for me, please. Keep them going here this morning. We had such a fun time with you all last night. Parks and Rec was great. Thank you to our conference committee for planning a great event. I heard there was a lot of learning that took place last night. There were some people who learned to play cornhole last night and had a great coach, evidently in Gen Z, who was very passionate at teaching some of our franchise operators how to play cornhole, which is an important skill, no doubt. I had no idea that Jen was the great instructor that she is, but she owned it through and through. So that's a good thing. And then if you got in the way of Celinda while she was playing pool, I mean, I'm just going to tell you, if you were not around while she had that pool cue, I would recommend you kind of stay back, because that side eye that she has when you get in her way of that shot is kind of intense. A little fun competition there. She likes to win. And I love her for that. She's winning every day. So let's jump into extreme ownership. How many of you learned some new things yesterday? Good, good. How many of you have thought about how you're going to take this book back and break it down and do those teach backs like we talked about, whether it be weekly meetings and a pre-shift, having your team read it and go through that teach back with you to integrate those learnings, because that's what's most important, right? Someone asked me yesterday, they said, Jennifer, why do you like speaking to us so much? You know, what is it that makes it fun for you? And Bob had actually asked me that last year during a one-on-one. And I said, you know what, I'm not speaking. That's not what I'm doing. I actually am up here helping you open your mind to receive a message. That's the only thing I care about, is inviting you on this journey with me, with lessons that great leaders, great mentors, great people like Jocko, who I have learned so much from, have taught me, and that has made me a better person, a better leader. And I'm asking you just to open your mind a little bit more and a little bit more so that we can plant seeds in there together. I can't do that. You do that work. You're the hero of that story. And then I'm hopeful that you feel a little fire, a little passion around that seed, and you go back and you start feeding it harder than anybody else can and watering that seed. And that a part of that is you start sharing that with others, because every time you share it, it germinates and goes deeper and deeper in you. And the next thing you know, you'll incorporate these behaviors yourselves, and your life will change for the better. That's what I'm doing. So what are you doing when you leave here? Be thinking about that. So what is extreme ownership? It's taking ownership of literally everything. Everything that affects the mission, whether it's in your AOR or not. And you remember the key attributes. Cast no blame. Point no fingers. Don't complain when you run into those barriers. Instead, solve the problems. And when you do that, you're using these 3 key principles that we talked about out of the book that are critical to your mission at the Melting Pot: accountability, teamwork, leadership. We talked about accountability pretty heavy yesterday. We talked about leadership, and we're going to continue to do that because those themes weave throughout the book. But today we're going to talk more about teamwork. We're going to talk more about the most productive teams, the most successful restaurants, organizations. Their teams exhibit this extreme ownership at every level. You've all been a part of those teams, right? I'm sure. You've been there where you just kind of felt like it came together and you gelled. And so for that to happen, the dish guy has to take extreme ownership and be the one that's kind of holding someone accountable when they didn't clean the pots well when he wasn't around. And there's no way a dirty pot's going to hit that table if that dish guy or gal has extreme ownership. Not going to happen under their watch. There's no way the lead server is going to put up with a server 2 stations down that's not doing a good job with checkbacks. That server is going to be covering for them with teamwork. If you're employing extreme ownership, excuse me, in your restaurant, those are the behaviors. And remember what Jocko said. There are only 2 types of leadership: effective or ineffective. Who can tell me what we talked about? If you're an effective leader, how do you know? Somebody yell it out. Points on the board, my man. That's awesome. Yeah, you got points on the board. Obviously, I'm mixing military with sports there, but who cares, right? We get that. But you know you're winning by points on the board, by those results with the server jumping in or coming to you and saying, hey, I've noticed that Sally is not getting her checkbacks. She's not dropping her cheese to the standard that Christy just talked about at Ops Conference that you brought back to us. That's not happening. I need some help because I see the guest suffering in this example. The table turns are too long. Then you know you're an effective leader. And it's okay. This is not about shaming you. Because guess what? We're all learning these lessons. In fact, I just learned one recently that I wanted to share that's kind of, it points the finger towards me and where I had to own something. So when I came on board with the melting pot, I assumed the opportunity, the pleasure of coaching the amazing people you saw up here yesterday. Chef Jason is on my team, Paul Brown, Christy Galke, Ashley Olson, Drew Lundy. Talk about luxury. And then Josh Bonanno came on to a hybrid role and is part of our team. I mean, it is the best team I've ever had the pleasure of coaching. And I really enjoy Jason's colorful language that he throws in from time to time as an operator. So we have a good time, we really do. But we work our asses off. But we're not perfect. We're learning lessons. And you're seeing those lessons come to light by the results that we're driving for you and our points on the board, which you should hold us accountable for, absolutely. But there were some behaviors that we needed to tweak. That's my job. My job, if I'm an effective leader, is to get points on the board and say, hey guys, we could do something better. We could make this more impactful for our organization, which is all of you and our franchise owners. So I asked them to employ a new discipline. No need to go into the detail of what that is, but with R&D specifically and new product rollouts, we needed to have a better KPI measurement tool, something that was more effective where we were confident of what this was going to deliver to you. SMART goals, right? If this is successful, what are we going to achieve? And what are our owners going to come back to us and say, hey, this was really great, thank you, this brought me results. Well, we talked about it in team meetings because we meet every week. I talked about it in one-on-ones. We talked about it where we're out in restaurants working. And it would go through ebbs and flows. This discipline would happen and not happen, happen and not happen. And I would get frustrated and I would over-explain it and I would break it down on a whiteboard and they would understand because they're brilliant. This is not about them, it's about me. So, sure enough, I'd forget about it. Time would go on. Maybe a project or two later, it would come up again. And then eventually, I was in a meeting with them, and I got a little frustrated. I'm going to tell you about what Jocko thinks about that in a moment. I got a little frustrated. I said, guys, I don't understand. Where's this thing, this discipline we talked about? And of course, they're amazing. So they looked at me, and they said, and they knew we talked about it. And there was a little bit of defensiveness in the room, and I'm pushing a little hard in the room. And I say, I don't understand. We've been talking about this for 18 months. What is it that's making us miss this? And then it hit me. I heard Jocko in the back of my mind. It's me. It's not them. I own this. This is not their fault. They're amazing leaders. They're amazing autonomous business units. I'm so proud of them. I had not broken this down effectively enough. I had not planned it to the nth degree and helped them wrap their mind around how to incorporate this into their process. So it was me that had failed, not them. And I felt myself getting what Jocko calls angry or hot about it, which is a true sign that there was something else in the room, and it was probably my ego. So I said, you know what, let me stop. They all started giving me apologies. I said, no. You don't own this, I own this. And I meant it, and they knew that I meant it. And what happened was their eyes got kind of big, and they said, wow, no. And then they started. Of course, Jason was the first to say, no, I own this. And then Chris said, no, I own this. Exactly what you heard about yesterday. It happened beautifully. Paul was sitting right there in the room. Everybody was there. They could tell you about it. But I owned it, not them. And so now we employ that discipline. And what we did was we all started owning it together. And hopefully in that moment, I got better as a leader. And that's going to happen again in a year and 5 years. Don't rob yourself of the ability to get better as a leader because you think you have to be right, because you don't. And Jocko does talk about when he feels that same thing to this day, and he feels like he's going to get louder or angry and try to push something through, he realizes that something is in the room and it's his ego. So how do you recognize your ego? Well, ego is the enemy of extreme ownership, by the way, because it works opposite of teamwork. How many of us have an ego in the room? I'm very proud to see those hands because it's part of who we are as mankind. It's that little monster that rides inside of us, and it tries to confuse our purposeful excellence that we strive for with extreme ownership with making you have to be right all the time. And that is not the case. So ego is absolutely the enemy of accountability and teamwork, right, Sue? It will fight hard to be right and not be wrong. It likes to point fingers and cast blame, all the things that we don't want to do. And so there is a difference in power and influence. We've heard this as leaders. But I know that the military incorporates this philosophy of being humble and not having an ego. My son served in the military for 8 years and was in ROTC for another 8 years between high school and college. And he's an amazing leader. And I noticed, he was really humble. So I just assumed the military taught you to be humble. I actually never asked him, do they say to you it's important for a leader to be humble, tell you that from a stage? I just made an assumption. That's what happened. But Jocko says, and Mike would tell you, and Christy would tell you, anybody who's served in this room, and there's many of you, again, thank you, that that's not the case. That failure is what breaks down your ego. That's why boot camp is so hard. That's why the BUDS training for Navy SEALs and Hell Week is so outrageously difficult. Because when you're laying on the sand, face down, and there's ocean water burning your eyes and running up your nostrils, you realize you screwed up. And that there's nothing about you as an individual that can be better than another person. You just got to keep getting up and owning it and striving for more, that your ego is not going to save you in that situation. No matter what happens between your ears, it's your intent, it's your drive to own it, your drive to leverage those assets and resources and relationships, your drive to say, we're going to figure out a way to be successful in this mission and get those points on the board. That's what's going to save you in that moment, not your ego. And they talked to Jocko in an interview, and they asked him about how easy is it for winners? Is it normally winners that come in and survive and become a Navy SEAL? And he says, no, quite frankly, it's the opposite. A lot of times the guys or gals that come in that are not gals in the SEALs, it's all guys, unfortunately, at this point, but that the guys that come in sometimes are supreme athletes. They are world champions, they have medals, they're very accomplished, really buff, very fit, and often those are the people who fail and ring that bell to get out because they're not used to this battle between I worked my whole life to be excellent in this thing, and now my ego is getting stripped and I'm having to experience failure. I'm not sure I can handle that. He said often it's the smallest guys, the ones that are not in the best shape, the ones that come from broken homes, the ones that didn't have the best trainers at home.
Not just for a SEAL, but for a person to do well, to be successful, is you've got to be humble.
In this room falls into that camp.
And when someone's not humble,
it didn't always have
that's
something
when
spoon-fed
all of a sudden they don't listen to anybody else.
Needed
That's when they can't,
to go out and
they
prove
don't want to
yourself
evolve
against.
anymore,
No, you made your way.
because they think they know
Now,
everything.
I'm not saying good home life's good
And
upbringing
so
is a bad thing. That's all a great thing. But
don't
just be aware
make
of
any
your
changes.
ego,
They won't
because your
improve.
ego can destroy
So
you.
the most
And let's
important
listen to
quality
Jocko
for me
talk about how
that I
important
look for in
humility
other
is
people
to
and that I try and
extreme
maintain in
ownership.
myself is the quality of
The most
humility to
important
make
trait
sure that for not just for a
you're
SEAL,
always
but for a
looking to
person to
improve
do well
and change
to
and
be
take
successful,
input from
is
other
you've got to
people.
be humble.
so that you can improve yourself.
And when someone's not humble, that's when all of a sudden they don't listen to anybody else. That's when they don't want to evolve anymore because they think they know everything. And so they don't make any changes. They won't improve. So the most important quality for me that I look for in other people and that I try and maintain in myself is the quality of humility to make sure that you're always looking to improve and change and take input from other people so that you can improve yourself.
What a great movie, huh? I loved hearing Jocko speak over that. Maybe The Pursuit of Happiness. How many of you have seen that? True story. Guy sleeping in a public restroom, didn't know what he was doing, ended up making it. has a cameo in the movie. Amazing, amazing story. But just be aware of your ego because it disrupts everything. It disrupts the planning process. It disrupts your ability to make good decisions. It disrupts your ability to have a contingency plan. Why? Contingency plan. Because it thinks, oh, I know what's going to happen. I already see the wind. I know what's coming around the corner. May not be the case. Gotta have contingency plans at all things. It disrupts the ability to take good advice. It can disrupt your whole thought process around self-preservation and then constructive criticism. How many of you, don't raise your hands, but ask yourself, are good at accepting constructive criticism? I saw some hands come up anyway. You know, we're so blessed to have Mike Mobley in leadership at the RSC. And so, of course, Bob also employs this belief of constructive criticism. But Mike brought in a new system for us. It's called Quantum. Doesn't really matter what it is, but what it does is it requires, or it offers this platform for us to have an organized one-on-one every 2 weeks with our team. Boy, that takes discipline. It's not, trust me, it is not something that is automatic to find that time to really do a quality job in filling out your team's one-on-one, and they have to fill out their own, and you compare the two thought processes to see were you aligned. And it's really valuable. And then once a quarter, we do an evaluation. Highly recommend this, by the way, even with your hourlies. There's no reason you can't pull a certain set to the side every week if it's 4 or 5 employees a week and go through your priorities with them and make sure you give them that gift of feedback. Constructive criticism is a gift. Help them be better tomorrow than they were today, better next week than they were last week. You've heard Bob talk about this for years. It's what great leaders do. So Mike had us use this for our quarterly one-on-ones, and as part of it, the team gives the leader feedback. If your team's not giving you hard-hitting feedback, where they say you could be better at something, you might want to check that ego. It's an important gift for you. It doesn't matter if the team is always right. It's their perception. It matters what gifts you can glean from that feedback. And one of my favorite feedback partners is Drew Lundy. She gives me very pointed, direct feedback. And that makes me so happy because I know that it's what she's seeing, and then it's my job to pick the nuggets out of that, right? And then, of course, we give an opportunity for the leaders to give them feedback as well, so all boats are rising together. Often the most difficult egos we've talked about is to deal with your own. We cannot let our egos take precedence over what we're doing to accomplish the common goals. It's very important. And I actually see some people with staffing this way. I know staffing is hard. Don't get me wrong. It's really a pain. It is a difficult thing. But there are people all around you who are winning the staffing game. I mean, I helped a friend of mine who bought a business out in Chesterfield, Missouri, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, and he was having a real hard time staffing out there because it is like where the most wealthy people in St. Louis live, and there's no bus line, and their kids don't have to work. And it was really probably one of the scariest situations that I was trying to help someone get staffed in. But Kyle staffed right down the street at St. Louis Town and Country. I mean, he didn't even know that I had that perspective of just a few years ago. And I asked him how his staffing was. Oh, we're staffed. Yeah, we're just doing great. Really? You're really staffed? Yes, we're really staffed. Like, why are you asking? So spend some time with Kyle. Spend some time with John and Karen Barnett, because I got to tell you, if those guys are staffed in that environment, then there's no reason everybody in this room can't be staffed. And I'm confident it has so much to do with what we've heard the last few days, that Mike's talked about, that Bob's talked about, making sure that we're treating people in the right environment, that Danielle talks about in her team, onboarding them with that UML properly and investing in them, and then for you to be this extreme owner. I've heard so many great stories, like Daniel out in Arlington. I mean, my goodness, Daniel, you've been up against some tough staffing situations, and what have you done? You've flipped on that server apron if you need to, you jump back on dish if you need to, you help your assistant manager do what's needed. You are leading your team through a difficult time while you're treating people fairly and figuring it out, and you're going above and beyond, so thank you for that. There's a lot of people who are winning in that game. Even if it's tough for a moment, keep your values high, and you'll dig your way out of that by exhibiting extreme ownership. Why? Because on any team, in any organization, all responsibility for success and failure rests with the leader. Leaders have to own everything in their world. There's no one else to blame. So, application of the melting pot. Bob often says, I said it yesterday, it may not be your fault, but it is your problem. It's your problem to solve. But the good news is, if you strip that ego away, you don't have to solve every problem. I have had more situations that I have time to go through where the crew people brought me the solutions. Literally had a restaurant that had a food safety nightmare, roast beef that was left in an auto sham overnight that got down to 75 degrees. They served it the next day. 70 people in the emergency room with true food poisoning, PR nightmare. Sales were down 50% in this location. Not a good situation. I just stepped in, took it over. At the end of the day, we had a hard road to hoe. It was on the top 5 critical sales units. We did a lot of things to figure it out and couldn't solve it. Held a staff meeting, put up a map of the city, got the team involved to create these little micro team bruiser units, and they came up with ideas for that city, and they just gave me the ideas and my manager, and we had to go execute it because of labor laws. They couldn't go out and do it. But we gave prizes for the people who came up with the most effective ideas, and guess what? Within 6 to 8 months, that restaurant was back on positive sales list, but it was all their ideas. It wasn't mine. So it was my problem to solve, but it was not my fault. Either way, we had to solve that, and we had to take control of everything. So let's talk a little bit more about contingency planning. How important is it? It's very important. And is there anything you can't do number 2 with that you can't control? I would submit there's nothing you can't control, which sounds kind of crazy, but let's listen to Jocko talk about a time when they couldn't control the weather. And he's telling us a story about an extraction that they went to attempt. And if you know much about extractions in the military, you know you get one shot to get it right. Sometimes it's months, maybe even years, that they plan an extraction to get somebody out of a bad situation. And there's no way you get to do it more than once usually. And there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of personnel, equipment, all that at stake, and lives at stake. So they went to do an extraction, and it didn't go well because one of those crazy sandstorms came up where you can't see your hand in front of your face. Let's see what Jocko says about that.
The next time you get into a situation and you write down, or you take the excuses and the reasons that you come up with, look at them, and then figure out how those things were actually your fault, and or how you could have prevented them. Because a lot of times it's like, here's one. Hey boss, we didn't get the mission accomplished because the weather rolled in and we couldn't launch on the mission. That's the problem. Now, we all know that we don't control the weather. So you write the problem down. We failed the mission because we didn't control the weather. We can't control the weather. That's why we failed the mission. That's my excuse. That's a logical reason. That's a legitimate excuse. But don't use it. What you do is you say, what could I have done to have controlled the weather? Okay, wait, I can't control the weather. What could I have done? I could have come up with a contingency plan. We could have staged in a better place. So then you go to the boss and you say, look, boss, here's what happened. The weather went south really bad. That was a problem, but it's a problem that I should have done a better job taking care of. What I should have done was I should have had a contingency plan. I should have staged closer to the target area, that I could have taken vehicles instead of helicopters. That's my fault. From now on, I will absolutely have a secondary plan. This won't happen again. We can't control the weather, but we can control how we plan and how we execute, and this won't happen again. There you go. So you take the most outrageous thing that you know you can't control, you figure out a way to control it, and you take ownership of that thing, and it's gonna make your life so much better. And by the way, the next time you have a mission and you plan that contingency and you actually execute and implement what you said you're going to do, guess what? You will accomplish the mission. Yeah. There's a whole part of ownership that preempts the problem.
It's a whole part of ownership that preempts the problem. There's no reason for failure. We cannot accept failure. The no excuses, sir mentality goes way beyond the military. It goes to every seat in this building, every seat out there in our restaurants, every person that's putting on a melting pot name tag perpetually, right? We have to control the weather. So if your ego's out of the way, then you're allowing yourself to think that way. At the end of the day, The next step that he talked about, you will win. You gotta solve those problems. You have to take action. There's an old video on YouTube, and I have a bad hairdo in 1995, and I said it back then, and it's been perpetually true ever since, that successful leaders take action on what they want, on what those goals are. So what does taking action look like today? You're gonna go find those people who controlled the weather, who were up high in sales for Valentine's Day or for New Year's Eve or for the last 8 years that we talked about. You're gonna go talk to those people who are staffing. You're gonna say, gimme, 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 let me glean from you, let me pick from you, please help me. And can I get your phone number so I can follow up with you on how I put this action step in place with my team, and if it doesn't work, can I follow up with you? You're gonna call me. You're gonna call your FBC. We are full of ideas to help you. Let me tell you about another guy in this room that's taking action, and that's Danielle. So we talked about Danielle from Arlington and then Danielle from Mexico. Danielle he's the director of the melting pot operation in Mexico. We have 3 stores there. We've been through some ownership changes. The Gin Group is a powerful organization in Mexico, probably one of the best leaders I've ever come in contact with. Dr. Raul Beirudi Sr. owns many businesses in Mexico. But our stores there have been suffering some with sales, well, pretty significantly with sales. And they've been looking for the right person to take the melting pot and run it. Well, Danielle came in, he was in training, and in the middle of training, he lost his boss. His boss left. So I remember his eyes when he said, my goodness, I don't even know what's going to happen when I get back. And Ana Rosales and John Westland and I were coaching him, and we said, just stick to what you can control. We didn't talk about weather at the time, but do what you can to make sure you learn everything about the melting pot so that when you get out of here, you are going to hit the ground running. Well, he did just that. Guess what? He's been out of training for less than a year? He's had 2 more leadership changes, but this guy is getting shit done. I'm just going to tell you, he has got those sales up. Polanco was in the top 3 restaurants around Valentine's Day weekend. He has helped people get training executed the role of hot food program. He's got ovens and fryers ordered. Yes, he's had support from the CFO and from the CEO, but in the midst of all this chaos, he's continued, not chaos from the organization, but leadership changes. He's continued to lead and stick to that mission. And what can he control? What is his contingency plan? That is impressive. So spend some time with Danielle, asking him how he's doing that. Just solve those problems, make today count, and you have to step forward. I'm going to skip forward here, and we're going to listen to Jocko, who talks about what happens when you take this ownership to that level.
Unlike a team where no one takes ownership of the problems and therefore the problems never get solved, with us, everyone took ownership of their mistakes. Everyone took ownership of the problems. And when a team takes ownership of its problems, the problems get solved.
So when you take that leadership control, like we've heard about these 2 leaders here today, you're going to help people stay focused on the mission, and they're going to help keep that going forward in spite of you being there to drive them or not. We all need that mission. It gives us purpose, drive, satisfaction, and we're all accountable to it. So great leaders inspire this level of teamwork, right? Right? Yeah, so you've all been a part of that, and it's important that you remember this. There's no bad teams, only bad leaders. I have to kind of rush through this story, but I want you to go back and listen to Jocko and hear this story directly, or you'll read it in the book. Good leadership is contagious. He talks about when Leif, the co-author, was out in BUDS, which is the Hell Week training of the Navy SEALs. And they have these boat crews, and they're getting towards the end of Hell Week. And these boat crews are carrying 200-pound rubber boats. And Leif was actually running the camp because Jocko was doing something else. And he noticed that the Team 6 kept losing, and Team 2 kept winning. Well, everybody wanted to win because when you won, you got rest. You got a chance to get snacks, you got a chance to get some food, but mostly you got rest. If you kept losing, you were staying in the water. Team 6 had not won any of the races yet. So Team 2 is over here resting. So Leif had an idea. He said, let me swap the leaders of these boat crews. The minute he swapped those leaders, Team 2 started losing, Team 6 started winning. He said he was shocked. The author the podcaster that interviewed him said, did you make that up? Like, it sounds like too perfect of a story. There's no way that can be real. He said, no, I didn't make it up. And Jocko then follows to say, I see this all the time. When the leader gets better, everybody gets better. And it happens automatically, especially when you're exhibiting extreme ownership. Leaders create that culture of accountability and teamwork and winning. Who doesn't want to win? How many people got up this morning and right now you're standing at the batter's box and you're about to hit the ball. The pitch is coming at you. Did you hope for a strikeout this morning? Were you like, oh, I can't wait to get up this morning so I can strike out? Oh, dang. Oh, maybe I'll get a walk. None of you got up this morning hoping for that. You all hope for that line drive where you can knock that ball straight out of the park past the fence line, and then you can just trot around that diamond, right? That's what we all hope for, and your employees hope for the same thing. Nobody wakes up wanting to lose. Everybody wants to win. So help them win by stepping from that fear into bravery, and you will be the best extreme owner that we have seen today. We're going to wrap up with Jocko.
The only way to overcome the challenges that you face is to start walking. Take that step every day, no matter what you are facing. Get up and start walking. You've lived a life dominated by doubt and fear. How do you step into bravery? Step. That's how you step into bravery. Step. Take the step. Step aggressively towards your fear. And that step towards your fear is the step into bravery. Because we're scared of what we don't know. And there is only one way to learn and to know, and that is to confront that fear. You have to step, you have to go. And this simple action, this simple attitude, it answers so many questions.
So do me a favor really quick. We're over by a minute, so stand up for me really fast. Yeah, I know that feels good. Let's just do a little bit of stepping. How many have a little stepping? So how many of you are going to step forward after today? No, I don't hear you. How many are going to, let me hear it. How many are going to step forward? Yeah, all right. So you're going to own everything, right? You're going to keep walking forward, right? You're going to make no excuses, and you are going to solve problems. And you're going to help a team build accountability that says we're going to win together, right? All right, thank you so much.